I'm making the biggest wargaming board in YouTube history, spanning the entirety of Middle-earth at 28mm scale. And today, we are working on a brand new location from The Lord of the Rings. This huge board is broken up into a series of smaller boards that all join together to form mega boards for each region of Middle-earth. The Siege of Gondor megaboard spanned from Osgiliath across the Pelennor Fields all the way to Minas Tirith, and in the last few months, I've begun work on the second Zorpazorp megaboard themed for Rohan. I've already begun work on Helm's Deep and Edoras, and eventually those will all join together in one massive layout with other Rohan locations like Isengard and the Westfold. But today we begin work on a brand new megaboard, a third layout to slot in between my Rohan and Gondor megaboards to finally start bringing those locations together. Just imagine being able to ride my Rohan army from Isengard all the way down past Helm's Deep and Edoras through Rohan to the Pelennor Fields in one continuous Warhammer layout. Now I can hear you all freaking out in the comments, but Lucky, why are you starting another board? Helm's Deep and Edoras aren't even finished. Well, bloody well settle down and I'll tell you in a minute. So what's actually going to be in our new board? Well, there are a whole bunch of important locations between Rohan and Gondor. We have the Druiden Forest, Kaya Andros, Anorian, the Mouths of the Entwash, but there is one very important location that long-time viewers will know I have wanted to make for a long time. Amon Hen, the location for the thrilling conclusion to the Fellowship of the Ring, is one of the most gorgeous locations in Middle-earth. A tall hill crowned in forests and tumbling ruins, looking out across Nen Hithoel and the falls of Rauros, has always been a huge fan favorite and a location I have dreamed of creating for decades. I've made a bunch of small scatter terrain boards inspired by the location over the years, but today we begin the journey to build a huge towering diorama complete with a massive resin pour lake, lush verdant forests, and a gorgeous suite of ruins that capture the memory of Gondor's former glory. So Amon Hen can really be broken down into 4 core components: a whole heap of ruined stonework and crumbling masonry, a lot of trees, a bunch of resin water features, and of course, a huge amount of cliffs and landforming. So we need to make a plan of attack for all 4 of these scenic elements. The ground forming, I've got the best handle on. My approach that I used for the Grey Havens board with plaster rock molds combined with foam worked absolutely gorgeously. It's going to be perfect for the Amon Hen hillside. The trees, though, are a bit tricky. I've got lots of these plastic tree armatures. I've had some success with them in the past, but we need a lot of different species of tree for such a wide area of forest, so there's some work to be done there. The water features are pretty simple, just pouring lots of epoxy resin all over the right spots in the board, but I think we're gonna start with the ruined structures because we can build a whole bunch of those and then use them to help kind of map out the overall start of the layout. Ruins, the absolute staple of all wargaming, especially Lord of the Rings Warhammer, and we are going to need a lot for Amon Hen. There are a bunch of very specific pieces that we need to make, like the seeing seat or the stairwell to get nice screen-accurate representation of the movies, and I've got some plans for those already, but the real task is to make a huge supply of various Gondorian ruins which we can then use to inspire all of the landforming. Now, I have just had a huge amount of success using the slice and slot system from Microforge Minis on my Minas Tirith board. Wait 1 second. Here's what I prepared earlier. These are gorgeous resin printed pieces that slot into extruded polystyrene, and they allow us to really easily knock up these intact kind of Gondorian styled structures, but I've never worked on them for ruins. I think they're going to be perfect though, but wow, we are going to need a lot of ruins. I think I'm going to need a little bit of help. It just doesn't stop. The man, the myth, the legend, LB from Microforge Minis is here, and oh my lord. Have you brought a lot of stuff, dude?
Mate, I've got all of your resin needs. Also, a little bit of the old gold.
The old gold. Many viewers are often commenting, why does Lockie keep saying his gold foam? It's just habit. It's because of this. The old Australian gold. I'm getting some serious resin gribbly envy here.
Look, it's all I could fit in the post, to be fair. And there's probably going to be some pieces here that you haven't seen before.
I've done a lot of work with the doors and the archways and the pillars, but there are some serious gribblies here. What's your favorite of all these stuff?
Okay, so I think if I had to choose one, and it's very hard to choose favorites with children, but it's got to be these little balustrade pieces.
They're gorgeous, yeah.
So these particular pieces are based on a real world, like 14th century French balustrade.
Cool.
That was up for auction, 14,000 euros for one piece of these. So
Far out, okay.
you can get them a lot cheaper
if you just print them in
if you
resin.
just print them yourself. These wall connector pieces.
Right, so this is like corners and T-junctions. And
Yeah. So you should be able to craft ruins super fast.
Good.
And have
Well,
nice corners.
That is what we need. Super
what
fast
we're gonna do.
ruins. Right. Let's get into it.
So job one was realizing we only had one hobby knife. A great start, but a spare blade, a pencil, and a bit of tape, and we are ready to go.
Come try to knife me. Get him.
To kickstart our ruin making, I had a big rummage through all the pieces Albie had brought with him, and my goodness, so many ideas are leaping out at me. It's mega overwhelming, but as always, it's time for a big old sort. I grabbed my usual plastic sorting tubs and separated all the various components: arches, pillars, balustrades, wall connectors, ruins. There is so much here. Albie grabbed the score-o-matic and got stuck into preparing all of our foam sheets with pre-scored brickwork so that we could hit the ground running, and I decided to start experimenting with some brand new pieces, beginning with this pavilion piece with 4 linked arches. I prepared some basic stonework to just slot into the top using the MDF jigs to cut matching circles to slot into those arches, and then we've got our normal foam brickwork techniques. The horizontal lines were all already cut by Albie, so it's just a matter of cutting in the vertical brick lines, widening all our grout with a pencil, and then texturing it all with scrunched up alfoil and depressing the odd brick, smushing it down to create relief in the stonework. But this new piece is of course 4 walls that join together above the arches, and Albie showed me a mind-blowing new technique which is going to change my ruin building forever. The new version of the score-o-matic stonework jig has these kind of patterns on the side that allow you to map out a tongue and groove join between your foam walls, which should join our walls together seamlessly, just like they were built by real stonemasons.
So the key thing here is making sure we've got the one side cut. We need to key it into the other piece so that it all just finger joints perfectly. Yeah, so that'll slot in nicely, and then it'll be a snug little piece that we can go straight into there.
After watching Albie cut the first piece and a dry fit of our first join, I jumped on the hot wire cutter and slammed out all the tongue and groove joins across all 8 sides of my stonework, and then started fitting them together.
Oh, that's so satisfying.
Over on Albie's bench, meanwhile, an awesome little ruin structure was taking shape, a mix of pillars and arches and crumbling masonry that is just screaming Amon Hen. I finished off the pavilion by gluing on all the gorgeous slice and slot resin columns to hold up my arches, and then made a simple little stone plinth to tie the piece all together.
Zorpazorp is taking an early lead over Microforge Minis here. I've got my first little structure happening. One structure. And we are like halfway through day 1.
We got to engage speed mode here.
Yeah, a little less yakking, a little more slicing and slotting, I think.
For my next ruin, I just fell in love with this new triple archway Albie had brought, as well as getting excited by some of these new wall connectors, and started working on a bit of a bigger structure, cutting down wall pieces and using MDF jigs to slice our slots that we can slide our resin pieces into. And to try and really get to grips with some of these new pieces, I decided to make a larger kind of ruin. Now the key here for Amon Hen is our ruins can still have a little bit of height. We're going to have such a steep board, we can sort of easily blend the tall ruins into the cliffs and the trees terracing behind them, but we need to make sure that even though the ruins are big, they're very crumbling, with much less solid kind of functioning walls than something like Osgiliath. These pieces are a lot older. In this bigger piece I've constructed, I've managed to incorporate some of the pre-ruined arches, my mega triple arch, and the corner, T-junctions, and cross-junctions from the new wall connectors, which has created this really awesome shape with great flow for gameplay and will look gorgeous crumbling amongst the wooded slopes of Amon Hen. So I slapped that down with my first ruin, and over on Albie's bench, a really interesting ruin with plinths and walls and balustrades was starting to come together.
day one finished. I have got my little plinth and a big old boy. How'd you go, Albie?
Well, mine are slightly smaller. Not that size matters.
And also, slightly off camera, there's like a whole other thing. So you're probably a bit ahead.
Little bit.
Albie's like well started on ruin number 3.
The competition is heating up.
It is. It's getting hot here in the Zorpazorp studio. But I'm thinking, let's get even hotter. Should we test them out?
Yeah, man. Let's see how they play.
Let's have a game.
After cleaning off the bench, Albie just begged me to instead christen the Grey Havens board, so we put the ruins to the side and had a quick game of Battle Companies using some glorious minis from Steel Sheen Painting and David Marsh. I've got their Instagrams linked below. We'll be taking a much closer look at those armies very soon. But then after Albie's elves held the Havens against my orc rabble, we picked our kind of second wind and decided to work long into the night. For my next ruins, I really wanted to explore these new pillar arches and build up some really interesting shapes. Amon Hen is basically the ultimate wargaming board for Lord of the Rings Warhammer. It's got everything: ruins, woodland, lots of small detailed terrain features, water effects. They all really suit the gameplay, and when I'm building my ruins, I really want to lean into that. Albie, meanwhile, had finished off his third ruin, an awesome little structure with a raised plinth and some balustrades, exactly the type of ruin I'm talking about. It just screams satisfying gameplay. I carved up a bunch more stonework, building out both the front portico archway and the main wall of the building, and then joined them together to finish my third ruin, a nice little structure that should complement the board nicely. Then I looked across the desk and Albie was once again screaming ahead with some crazy new structure featuring a bunch of different arches and plinths and stairs, and with the clock striking midnight, I decided to make a start on one final building and was struck by an idea that should swing this ruin building contest back in my favor. Making small scenery, it's just not really my skill set, and nothing gets me hyped like making stupidly massive stuff. So this next structure got my old brain fired up. It's nice and big, and I set about knocking up a heap of wall panels using my favorite slice and slot details that I discovered over the day so far. A new tall window detail, another triple arch, but this time I smashed it up to make it ruined, and I'm hoping to make something nice and tall that will allow me to build this kind of viaduct style frontage crumbling down into the mossy forest below. Albie, meanwhile, had begun adding more glorious balustrade details to his latest creation. I just love those little pieces, little mini balustrade pillar action too. That piece is just looking fierce. Back on my building, all the foam carving is done, so it's glue time, baby. The triple arch into the wall, the ruined windows into the upper story, and then on the bare section of front wall, the lower level of our viaduct-style portico. I then bulked out the top of the stone with these gorgeous resin details, ruining and chipping one of them to become the end piece crumbling away into the forest, and then to complete that viaduct look, a whole second level of ruined arches and smashed up pillars blending into our ruined upper level. A few extra details and kaboom. How sexy is this little piece? Surely that scores me at least 2 points in the Ruin Building Championship. But just when I thought I was home free, across the table, that cheeky Albie has begun a whole new ruin with a whole new type of balustrade details, including some sexy stairs.
So on a Sunday afternoon, we have slogged through and just got an absolute horde of ruins built. Albie's knocking off his last one here.
Last one.
Looks
Last
good,
one.
man.
Yeah, thanks, man. Getting some of these balustrades into the action.
Yes, bit of
It's gonna be good.
stairs.
Yes, verticality.
Verticality.
You know we love it.
Got to have some Zorpazorp verticality. But the issue is, it's 4 hours till Albie has to be at the airport, and we got to get some paint down. So while Albie finishes off his last one, I want to see these ruins in some grassy Amon Hen board. Let's get painting. If you guys are getting hyped for the new edition of Lord of the Rings Warhammer, make sure you use my affiliate links down in the description. I've hunted out the best prices no matter where you are in the world or what Warhammer you're buying. So use those links down below. It sends a little kickback to support everything we're doing here on the channel, which is just so insanely helpful.
So these beasts are made from foam, so the primer is of course dark grey house paint through the spray gun, although with these small ruins, they kept trying to run away, but they will not stay orange on my watch. Then it's just the classic Zenithal prime with lighter greys using rattle cans from above, accenting the stonework's raised details and leaving our dark grey prime in the recesses.
Crafting with 2 people.
It's so good.
Yeah. I wasn't lonely. But it's also like you never stop because you're always chasing the other person, the motivation, and like, oh, what are they doing?
Yeah, the inspiration is really interesting, and especially seeing like someone like yourself, master crafter, get a hold of these pieces.
Yeah.
It has inspired me to use things very differently.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, and the same thing. You built this stuff. You know how to use it. I've been building it the one way, Minas Tirith. I'm like, oh man, that's a gnarly way to use that piece. Right. Well, I guess it's time to get you back to the airport.
Yeah, sadly.
Yeah.
We gotta go.
Yeah, let's go.
I whizzed Elby back over to Christchurch Airport, and his crafting journey did not end there. I'd gotten him so revved up by the Amon Hen build that he went back home to Australia and built even more for my mega board using a couple of really sexy pieces that we didn't actually have here this weekend, and he's made an awesome video over on his channel, which I've got linked down in the pinned comment, so go check it out for more juicy foam carving action. With Elby flying home safely, it was back to the workshop, and the next stage is just a monster black wash. I'm actually doing this a little darker than I normally do because I really want these resin details to sing. I slathered it on everywhere and then let it fully dry overnight, and then came back with light greys and a nice soft brush, dry brush down from the sky to accent those raised details and hint at our light source above, the dappled sunlight peeking through the forest canopy.
So there's more to do on these, flocking, rubble, extra oil weathering, but we're going to do all of that once these are glued into the mega board. So where do we go next? An amazing Kiwi company called Metalbird, who are big fans of Zorpazorp, and they've sent me these gorgeous Middle-earth metal art pieces. We've got the Witch King on Fellbeast, the Balrog, the Green Dragon, and Gandalf on Guahia.
Gandalf on Guahia is such an epic piece, and last week I found the perfect little home for him watching over my strawberries. Honestly, picking the perfect spot in the garden is so much fun. Rooster and I spent an evening hunting for that perfect silhouette, but up in the wooden frame of my old shed went the Witch King on Fellbeast. Now he and Gandalf can do battle across the veggie garden. I want to save a couple for inside the workshop too to add to the studio backdrop, so I'll have a play with those and report back next week.
I met the team from Metalbird earlier this year, and they're lovely folks, and they just wanted to support Zorpazorp artist to artist. So if you guys buy any of these Metalbirds through my link in the description, they'll send me a little kickback, and you can support Zorpazorp, support conservation of native bird life all around the world, and score a Middle-earth Metalbird for your garden.
So with the ruins coming along swimmingly, it's time to start having a look at how we're going to tackle the other major scenic elements of Amon Hen, and we're going to start with the cliff work nestled in amongst the woodlands. Now I think I've absolutely nailed part of this approach already in my Greyhavens board. I started off by combining my mate James and my rock molds, and made about 100 plaster casts of various cliffs and outcroppings, so I am well armed with an arsenal of rockery, and then I grabbed some big chunks of foam to start building the landforming and act as mounting points for my casts, and then layered and staggered the various cliffs to try and get a nice naturalistic rock face. This technique of layering large blocks of foam is going to be perfect for Amon Hen, as I'll be creating the shape of my cliffs from scratch rather than here with Greyhavens where I used the 3D printed structures as a guide. Then with the lower rock faces in place, I blended them all together with a heap of modeling compound, and suddenly the mess of separate casts becomes a cohesive, delicious rock face. Now the cliffs here in the Greyhavens board are large, but Amon Hen is going to have some massive sections of rocky escarpment below the seeing seat, and then of course in areas around the falls of Rauros. So another technique from the Greyhavens I'll be pinching is building cavities into the structure made from structural foam, and then building up additional rock faces on foam panels that are then mounted together. The key to getting all this rock work to look good, of course, is painting. For Amon Hen, we'll have the exact same combination of stonework built into the mountainside, so we'll need to use a bunch of masks to protect our plaster rock molds so that we can use the absorbency of the plaster to help us achieve a really naturalistic rocky tone using leopard spotting. For the Greyhavens cliffs, I mixed up a bunch of diluted washes in natural hues, flicked on a speckle color onto the rocky surface, varying the tones to build up the kind of many hues of natural stone, and then give it all a large overwash in diluted black, and then aggressively overbrush the entire cliff face with a dry brush to knock the color back off the raised details for a nice kind of quartzy highlight as that plaster comes back through. I then added a bunch of scenics on top of the cliff work and even a few trees, and I think you guys will agree that this board turned out phenomenally well, and it's the perfect little mini case study for the Amon Hen techniques that we'll need. And if you want to see the full Greyhavens board, I'll link that down in the description. But of course, the other big scary factor for Amon Hen is our trees, and by cracking into those next, we'll be able to plan out where our cliffs need to be sculpted into the landform. So our first major weapon is plastic tree armatures. These bad boys are from Woodland Scenics, and I have been using them for decades. My favorite is these kind of thin, taller little lads that are great for making pines or fir trees or poplar. The first step is to twist them all out and then get their branches nice and splayed, and then a quick coat of brown paint, and they're ready for some foliage. To glue the foliage down, you need to use some sort of tacky glue that dries into like a grabbing gel, often they're urethane based, rather than something hard and brittle like a PVA, so the flock doesn't just fall out when you bump them while trying to ambush the fellowship and steal some pesky hobbits. Once the glue is tacky and semi-dry, it's time to just smoosh on a bunch of clump foliage. You can use foliage of any kind of size or grade really, it just changes the styles of tree that you end up with. A nice mix of colors is always good too. I whipped up a little blend of like mid and dark green with a small bit of light green, fairly small to medium sized clumps, and smooshed on all of the flock, pressing it firmly into the glue so that the little plastic branches skewer it in place while the glue fully dries. Once the glue is fully cured, I then soak the whole trees in watered down PVA mixed with matte varnish. This locks the whole foliage piece together into sort of one solid foamy mass of greenery, which helps it all stay nicely adhered to our armature. While those are drying, I then decided it was time to cannibalize a bunch of my old Amon Hen trees. Now, very, very old time viewers will remember my first attempt at Amon Hen back in like 2019 maybe, when I made these trees, essentially done with the same sort of process as the trees we just made, but using a very different style of plastic armature. Back in Australia, before I moved to Aotearoa, New Zealand, I already ripped all of the trees off their bases and cannibalized them for future use and posted them here to New Zealand. But they are in a bit of a sorry state. So it's time to bring them from a dreary, damaged winter to a sparkling spring. I grabbed some fast-drying basing glue and dumped it on the branches where the flock had peeled off, and then jammed on some new clump flock, making sure it was also partially skewered by the tree armature's branches. A few of the trees also needed help getting remounted, so I drilled in some brass rod to the base so they'll be perfect for sticking into our Amon Hen hillside, and then once they've all been spruced up and they're looking pretty okay, they also need a little spice. So I soaked them in scenic sealant, which also toughens them all up, and then sprinkled a mix of fine flocks from the top, some yellows, some greens and browns, and when that dries, it will create a really lovely varied foliage color, all tied together by the greens underneath for another completely different set of species of trees for our Amon Hen board.
This is obviously just a little mock-up, but all of our ingredients are here now. Ruins, trees, cliffs. We've got an approach for everything that we're going to need to build the full Amon Hen mega board, which will be about 3 of these 6x4s. So now it is time to start planning that layout. A big shout out to Albie from Microforge Minis for spending a whole weekend with me and just helping me smash out these ruins. If you want any of his gear, it's linked down in the description. We're not going to return to this next stage of the Amon Hen board for probably a few months because we are smack bang in the middle of Rohan time right here. So stay tuned for a whole lot more on our Rohan mega build and so much exciting Middle-earth content to come. It is a golden age for Middle-earth, and there's more coming right here on Zorpazorp. Thanks, guys.